Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to boil tea. I've just recently released this Fu brick from Hunan, a dark tea or a hei cha, which I've done a video about, so I'll stick a link in the description below. But in that video I said that I wanted to show you how to brew this tea in a boiling style, a boiled tea style, which is very traditional for this type of tea. In fact, boiling tea is the original way of making tea. So we talk about Gongfu tea, and you know that I champion Gongfu tea brewing a lot. And it is a remarkable way of brewing almost all types of tea. However, the original way of brewing tea was just boiling leaf in water. Super simple, super basic. And the act of boiling tea, reenacting that tradition, is a very, I think, special way of brewing tea. It seems very basic, it seems very sort of simple, and it seems in a way crude, but in fact, just with everything in tea, there's a lot of skill, artistry and consideration that goes into this brewing style. And as I said, it harks back to the olden days, the traditional way of brewing tea back in the Tang Dynasty and before, because don't forget that tea is the first Chinese medicine, and all Chinese medicine is boiled. If you look at TCM, it's always a boiled medicine. So you're taking herbs and you're boiling it. And the act of boiling draws out all of the goodness and really penetrates into the herbs or the leaves and draws out a certain character, a certain medicinal character, but also a different kind of taste and texture and feeling in the mouth compared to steeping tea. So boiling tea has its heritage. Boiling tea should be celebrated. Boiling tea should be done with consideration. And as we are, I'm speaking to you in November, as we're moving into the festive season, boiling tea is a great way to brew tea for a group of people, because as we know, Gongfu brewing is a little bit more difficult to brew with lots of people. Boiling tea is a great way of doing it. So if you're watching at the time of release, then this is a great way to sort of prep for your festive period. So as I said, boiling tea is very, very traditional. It involves simply boiling leaf in water. It is very different from steeping tea. You're going to get a different kind of brew or taste out of your tea, and I want to show you the basics here. Now you can go more ceremonial and you can sort of really dive into the ceremonial aspects of brewing. You'll have different cauldrons or pots, you'll have different, ladles with filters in made of gourd. You can sort of pimp up your boiling tea session so that it's a lot more sort of beautiful, aesthetic, etc. Feel free, but I just thought I would show you the basics with just kitchen utensils that you should have around you. So you just need a pot, you need it would help if this was on, you need a form of heat. Now the form of heat is a bit controversial, not controversial, it's just there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions. Generally you want it over fire, ideally charcoal is best, but I'm just using gas here, so a simple sort of camping gas stove here. I would say gas is second best, so you want fire. Induction heaters, electric is possible, but it's not as good in the tests, the very few tests that I've done. The act of the continuous flame helps to really draw out all of the goodness. It's a thing or a discussion that we can talk about in another video, the different types of heat. So I'm going to leave it there. Ideally charcoal or gas flame, but if not, use an induction heater, use an electric hob if you want. So you need the heat source, you need the pot. I'm using ceramic here. I prefer ceramic rather than stainless steel or aluminium. Again, we can talk about that a bit later, but you can do it in stainless steel. You can do it in any pot you want. It's just increments of improvement slightly in flavor. You're gonna need a ladle, you're gonna need a filter, you're gonna need a bowl to serve it in. For me, you can serve it in a mug, and we are serving in larger portions here. So a mug or a bowl would be possible. I just think that the mug just adds a certain tactile, emotive quality and aesthetic quality. When you're drinking it, there's something different about drinking out of a bowl compared to a mug. So I would say get yourself a good mug like this, a good bowl like this one. You need some tea, obviously. I'm using Hunting for Pralines, this fucha, and also for me, a non-negotiable is salt. You need a bit of salt, and I also think non-negotiable is that you want mineral salt instead of sea salt. Mineral salt, I've got Himalayan pink salt here, has got a different character to sea salt. Sea salt makes the water or the tea taste salty much quicker. Mineral salt just adds minerals, but it serves the purpose of what salt is meant to do here, which is you're not meant to taste it, you're meant to feel it. It's meant to soften, smoothen, reduce astringency, and add a tiny bit of a sort of umami savoriness, but you're really not supposed to taste the salt. So I have in here 1 liter of water, and it's already boiling. So I'm going to turn this down. This gas stove just turns off when I turn it down. That's what's happening here. And I'm going to suddenly have gas in the air. So I'm just turning it on the lowest heat possible. As I said, I'm going to be showing you the informal way of doing this with fresh leaves. There is a more ceremonial way of doing it, which you can dive into. When I say with fresh leaves, I mean fresh leaves like this, ready to go, that haven't been brewed before. Now you can also use this boiling tea method with spent leaves. So leaves that have already gone through infusion. So let's say you've had 4, 5, 6 infusions of a tea and you want to boil it up. You can immediately then boil those leaves using the same method that I'm showing you here. Or you can save those leaves in a sort of dry place and come back to it 5, 6, 12 hours later. But if you're going to do that, then I recommend that you take the leaves beforehand and you just put them in some cold water, some good quality water, cold water for about half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour. That just sort of takes away the mustiness of the taste in the tea from it sitting and waiting for too long. And it also just sort of cleans the tea and just gets it ready. So if you're going to be using spent leaves, then after you've brewed it, go immediately after you've gone through brewed it, go immediately into the boiling tea method. Or as I said, what you can do is you can leave it for a number of hours, up to a day, and then just soak it for about half an hour in cold water before you do this. But don't use that cold water, pour that cold water away, and then you've got leaves ready for the brewing process. Okay, we're going to talk about the reasons why boiling tea, the differences between boiling tea and Gongfu brewing while we're doing this, but I just want to show you the method. So I've got 1 liter of water here. I've got 12 grams of this tea here. Now, I usually say use about 1/4 of what you would use for Gongfu brewing. So for this tea, normally I recommend about 5 grams per 100 ml. So that would be 50 grams per liter, and I'm dividing that by 4. So 12 and a half grams, right? Western style brewing is about 1/6 of Gongfu brewing, right? Just to give you an example. So this is closer to Western brewing, but it's still a little bit more leaf. So break up your leaf, get it ready. Got this amazing fucha, which is perfect. And we'll talk about the different teas which suit boiling tea once these leaves go in. I've got lots to try to cover today, so I'm going to try to remember. So the water is now boiling. You're probably not going to be able to see that in the camera above because there's lots of steam. Now, I'm going to add salt. Now, I don't really measure because I'm sort of used to it, but I did measure and it was about 1/2 gram of salt for a liter of water. So 1/2 gram is about this much. So I'm going to put this in, right? And I'm going to just use the back of the ladle. I'm keeping things super simple. As I said, you can, make this as aesthetic and as pretty as you want with lots of tools, but I'm just going to keep it super simple because I'm conscious that people are going to want to just start using this method without having to, go out and buy lots of little ornamental things for themselves. If you enjoy this method of brewing, and I really encourage you to try out, then please do go ahead and make it a whole chashi, a whole tea stage. I'll also say, okay, let me just do one thing at a time. So what I'm doing now is I'm just making sure that that's dissolved, but I'm creating a little bit of a vortex here because I'm going to now drop these leaves in. So in go the leaves into the middle. Now, the reason why we're creating the vortex is I want them to really go into the water and not float on top. Right, so now what I'm going to do is put the lid back on. I'm going to lift the heat up a little bit, and there's a little bit of controlling heat here in the boiling tea method. And so I want to control the heat so that it comes to a boil, to a simmer, and then just sort of sits at a simmer. Now you don't want the tea to boil over, so you want to control the heat so that it's not boiling over. And of course you can also just lift the lid ajar a little bit to allow some steam to escape so it doesn't bubble over. But you want to be sort of taking a look at it, and as you get into brewing tea, it'll become very instinctive and super simple. So, before we get into the different tea types, let me just say that, as I said, boiling tea can be very ceremonial or it can be very informal. It can also be something that you do, you sit, you spend time out in nature or in a beautiful environment, you set up your tea stage and you sit and you have a long session of boiled tea with guests or by yourself. Although I think that, with guests is more suitable for this amount of water, but you can do it by yourself. And really dedicate a long tea session. Maybe you want to take a book, maybe you want to do some writing, maybe you want to do some sort of quasi-meditating and drinking tea while you're enjoying the scenery. So you can do that. You can really set up your stage and you're going to have a few hours, a couple of hours, a few hours of just sitting and drinking the most beautiful bowl tea, boiled bowl tea, and you're going to be, drinking it all the way through and really making full use of these leaves. Let's just quickly take a look. So this is boiling, so I'm just going to now just reduce the heat and let it boil. And we're going to be boiling this for about 5 to 10 minutes. With boiled tea, it's really just a feel thing. It's a matter of taste. You're going to drink it, you're going to go, oh, it's a bit weak. You're going to just cook it a bit more, and it's always going to be ticking over, so it's always going to be getting stronger. That's the beauty of boiled tea. It's much less sort of like a timing thing or trying to work out exact parameters. It really is about just sort of tasting it. So you can do that long solo or group sessions where the tea is the stage, the tea is part of this stage, and you are really just dedicating yourself to a long session of bowl tea while you're talking or you're, meditating, as I said, or reading or writing. Or you can treat this more as this is on the stove and I'm going to be getting on with stuff and moving around and serving myself some boiled tea. Much more sort of practical, much more active. It's sort of always on the go, the boiled tea. As I said, if you're going to be doing this during your festive season, maybe that's what you want to do. You'll set up some boiled tea and you just come and take a look at it every now and again and fill it up with hot water and just keep it boiling. So that's the other way, just sort of very practical, functional, how it would be done up in the borderlands, up in Tibet or, Mongolia, where they're out and about, they're working, but there's this tea just boiling on the stove. So the way that it works is the tea goes in, we leave this for about 5 to 7 minutes or so, and then we start to ladle off the tea. And obviously if you've got lots of people, then you'll be ladling lots of bowls. And once you start to get quite low in water, you'll fill up the water with preferably boiling water already. So you don't want to put cold water in, you want to put hot water in. So you do need another kettle or a heat source nearby. So a kettle just nearby, and then you just pour in another liter of water. Every time you're pouring in the water, you can, if you wish, add a little bit more salt, because obviously you're adding more water, so the salt solution or the level of salt is going to be reduced. So putting a little pinch of salt, and you can, if you want, top up with some extra fresh tea. So you can keep this session going for a long period of time, and it's very, very free form. So you can taste it, and the beautiful thing about boiled tea is as the water penetrates deeply into the leaves, a different character comes out, and it becomes soft and it becomes smooth, which is again sort of maybe against the logic of tea, because you'd think, well, it's brewing for a long period of time, so it's going to get very strong and very bitter. In fact, that's the opposite. Obviously, it depends on the type of tea that you're using, and we'll talk about that in 1 second. But basically it gets softer and gets smoother. So if you add more fresh leaves, you're sort of changing the balance. You're changing the character of the tea that you're drinking. So I like to do that. Just have like, not nowhere near as much, just like little pinches of fresh tea if you're going to be ticking it over. And if you're going to be doing this over the festive period or with groups over many hours, then that's what I would suggest you do. Have a kettle nearby, have the salt, and have some of this tea, whichever tea you're going to be using, and just add a little bit every maybe 2 refills of water. Let's take a look. So you can see here, this is just ticking over. I'm going to put a little bit more. I just want to see a few little bubbles in there, just so that we really want continuous heat. And that's one of the things about boiled tea, is that it's all about this build-up of heat. And we can talk about the temperature, but we can also talk about the character. That continuous heat develops and just somehow imbues the tea liquor with this intensity of warmth. It's a very warming way of making tea. Right, let's talk about the different teas that suit boiled tea. If you're going to be using spent leaves, then I would say dark oolongs, especially strip oolongs like yencha, rock tea, very, very good. Rock tea has a really different character when you boil into the tea leaves. I would say I wouldn't recommend so much adding so much salt with rock tea because it has so much mineral content already. So you might want to reduce the salt or not put any salt in at all. Dansong teas, so again, strip oolong from South China, dark teas, medium oolongs. Boiling tea suits more larger leaf pickings, so medium pickings and larger leaf pickings. So larger leaf oolongs that are darker. It doesn't suit light oolongs, in my opinion. It doesn't suit any of the greener teas. So green teas or sort of very green oolongs, I would avoid using this method. White teas can be amazing with spent leaves, especially if the leaves are darker because they've been aged. So, but you can use fresh white tea, but again, I would recommend only using it after you've had some gong fu brew. So you really get the flavor of the gong fu brewed tea, and then afterwards you're getting more out of the leaves. So white teas, especially aged, medium and dark oolongs, especially strip oolongs. I would avoid black teas. I think that they go too astringent, and I would avoid green teas. Then you move into, and I would avoid yellow teas. So those are the 3 tea types that I would avoid: black, yellow, and green. Sheng pu'er, raw pu'er, spent leaves can work amazing. And obviously heicha, darkened tea like ripe pu'er or liu bao or fucha or any of those anhua dark teas, all of those teas can work super, super well. In fact, this is what it really is designed for. That's spent leaves. For fresh leaves, I would say dark teas are the absolute top of the pile. They suit this style of brewing very, very well. Aged white teas, you can go straight into brewing boiled method. And raw pu'er, you can, but it's got to be a particular raw pu'er, preferably an aged one, so that it's just darker and a little bit less of that spring, fresh, green astringency, which will pull out too much of the bitterness. So, recap: spent leaves, white strip oolongs that are darker, raw pu'er tea, ripe teas. For fresh, ripe teas, aged white teas, and raw teas that are preferably a little bit more aged. Okay, there you go. Right, now that's been a few minutes, maybe about 7 or 8 minutes. You can see it ticking over here. Yeah, that camera placement is not the best because it's just going to get all of the steam. I hope you can see here what's happening. Let me just see if I can make that a bit better. Right, so now you're just going to simply ladle tea into a bowl, right? I give it a little stir just to sort of even out the brew. Now, when you're ladling tea without a filter like this, then it's better for you to have a filter. You can get ladles with filters built in, and you can get gourds with filters at the bottom, so you just literally fill up and you pour it through a filter. There's all sorts of things you can do, but I like to do it like this and just put the ladle towards the edge. Let me see if I can show you, towards the edge, and then just take the tea in there. You're not going to pick up that many leaves because most of the leaves are going to be falling to the bottom, and then you just simply strain it into your bowl. Now, I like, when I'm having boiled tea, I like to not serve too small portions. I like to have sort of maybe half a bowl. Now, this is going to be hot, so make sure you warn your guests. This is not like your gong fu tea. It's hot in terms of temperature, and for some reason this continuous heat just means that the heat stays for longer. Right, so now I'm going to put that back on here. Now, if I'm drinking by myself, that's it. I'm literally letting that tick over. And when it starts to get a bit too strong, or the water gets too low, I'm just going to add more water to it. So it really is like grandpa style brewing, but on a stove. If you don't know what grandpa style brewing is, I'll stick a link in the description below. Right, now let's taste this tea. It's going to be hot, but I have an asbestos mouth. What is remarkable about boiled tea is that the expectation is going to be that you're going to have a very strong, potentially aggressive tea in the mouth. If you pick the right tea, this is just so suited to this style of brewing, which is why when I did the video, I was like, I have to show you the boiling method. If you use the right type of tea, it is remarkable how sweet, how soft, how gentle it is in the mouth, whilst still having an intensity of character that comes from heat. The taste changes. With gong fu brewing, you're going to preserve much more of the high, bright notes, right? So you're going to have more of those lively notes in a tea. When you are boiling it, you're boiling away a lot of those transient notes. And what you're left with is like the bones of the tea, which is hard for me to describe, but it's going to mean that you are going to taste more of the mineral, more of the warm, soft, sweet notes of a tea. You're going to taste more of the inner leaf material, which means you're going to be tasting more about the soil, the rocks, the landscape, the earth, but it's all in the ground rather than the sort of trees and flowers around. So it is a very different tasting tea compared to gong fu. And maybe some of you are thinking, oh, well, I want to have the full spectrum. I want to have the high, bright, like top notes. But you can't get the character of this tea in gong fu style. The character of this tea is so difficult to describe. It's so like rich and warming. I'm getting caramels. I'm getting the Brazil nuts, the pralines, the hazelnuts, all of those incredible nutty notes that I had when I drink it gong fu style. But here they taste gentler, sweeter, more rounded. When you change the EQ of a tea through brewing style, sorry, this just keeps on going off when I turn it down to its lowest setting. When you change the EQ and you move it more into those bassier warm notes, everything just becomes calmer. Everything just becomes sweeter and more gentle. So caramels, nuts, lots and lots of sweet water, sweet. It's almost like you've taken the tea and you've drizzled in a little bit of agave syrup. So sort of a plant sweetness, but it's really, really a character of boiled tea. It has a gentleness that doesn't come from Gong Fu brewing, where it's really about drawing out lots of flavor and aromatics. This is much more gentle. It feels very sustaining. It feels more medicinal. Again, counterintuitive. When you think that you're boiling these leaves for a long time, you'd have thought that it would be the other way around, that it would be more aggressive. This feels super gentle, super warming. I almost don't want to talk tasting notes with boiled tea, because with boiled tea, you are drawing out you are highlighting a different aspect of tea, which is in many ways more important than taste, which is the underlying body sensation and character and medicinal quality of the tea. I don't taste any salt, but it has a soft, smooth, velvety texture. And I know that if I hadn't put that salt in, it would be a little bit thinner. It also has an amazing way of attenuating any bitterness, of which there is very little in this tea. But any bitterness is just controlled. And I do pick up a tiny, so I was talking about before, a tiny sort of like brothy, umami quality in the tea. I'm tasting the bones of the tea. Hard to describe, but when you taste a boiled tea, you will know. Right, let's serve ourselves another infusion or another ladle, a couple of ladlefuls. Now, obviously, as I said, if you're brewing with lots of people, this first boil will go a lot quicker. But what you will do is when I've had maybe 1 or 2 more bowls after this, so sort of 3 to 4 bowls total, then I would be topping up with half a litre of water, maybe a litre of water, and then you would cook it for longer. You'd boil it for longer. So you'd maybe then turn up the heat, make sure it's simmering, and you might do it for 20 minutes. And as you boil into the tea, it's amazing. Let me just check. Yeah, just get it ticking over a bit. It's amazing how much smoother, it just becomes so smooth and so sweet. And you can literally just like keep going. And it just like, I don't think it ever runs out. Yes, it becomes weaker, but it still maintains something of the character of the bones of that tea. All right. You see, this has been cooking for another 5 minutes compared to my first bowl, and it is so smooth, so sweet, and still got the character in terms of taste. Picking up some of the clay, I'm picking up some of the sort of stewed fruit notes, like jujube note is in there, sweet red date, but dried and cooked down for a long time like a jujube syrup. It becomes syrupy. It loses all of those top notes, but you're intentionally just getting rid of it so you can really experience those warm, sweet, bassier bones of the tea, and the minerality of the tea is different. It feels strong, but at the same time gentle. It doesn't like hit your mouth with loads of minerals, but it just coats over time in a more gentle way. Overall, boiling tea is a more gentle way of brewing tea, more restorative, I would say, in terms of a medicinal quality, definitely more warming, definitely more heating, definitely something you need to sort of watch out for, because it will get you tea drunk, but you don't sort of notice because the brews taste so sort of gentle. But after a few bowls, you will be feeling it. I guarantee it. Boiled tea, a way to retrace the heritage of tea back to its roots, back to the original way of taking leaf and just throwing it in a cauldron with water and just letting it brew up It's, you know, don't forget that tea was a herb that was used for medicinal purposes, but also probably used in food. So they were probably just boiling it like you would boil any vegetable. So boiled tea is the original way of making tea. I should also say huang pian teas are great. So if you're going to be using raw pu'er tea for boiled tea, and you want to really, I would say, maximize the deliciousness and the character of a huang pian, then that is a great choice for boiled tea because of the larger leaves. So huang pian raw pu'er definitely deserves a special mention, but HR, especially these borderland teas like this hunting for pralines, is perfect. I can dive deeper into more ceremonial ways of using boiled tea, but I hope that this practical, basic, informal way of boiling tea is something that you try and that you enjoy by yourself or with family and friends. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you are in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the sublime stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.